Today, this car is iconic. But in the late 70s, only a handful of automotive enthusiasts had even heard of the DeLorean, DMC 12. The car was first showcased to the public at the National Automobile Dealers Association show of 1978.
DeLorean was present. He had made presentations also, and was also trying to, I believe, develop some capital in order to make a production vehicle from the DeLorean.
But this wasn't the car you might be familiar with.
Wait a minute, Doc.
Unlike the later production model, the first prototype DeLorean shown at NADA was built by Carcraft in Detroit. This car had a Citroen engine with a rear radiator. It had sliding side windows and no front grille, only a gloss black face, and had its front turn signals at the edges of the front bumper. The vehicle had a large front trunk, or bonnet, for storage, and a typical front opening hood. More important though, was the interior. This is where John DeLorean's original DeLorean safety vehicle designs were clearly visible. These safety features included the deep padded knee crash bar, padded A-pillars, padded side doors, and most importantly, the driver's side airbag. Automotive safety was very important to the public at the time. The DeLorean was one of only two production cars that had been designed as a safety vehicle. The other was the Bricklin, which had recently gone out of production, leaving only the DeLorean. This would be the first time the public would see John DeLorean's dream car. But it would not be the last. In 1980, DeLorean would be back at NADA with a second prototype. This car was built by Visioneering of Detroit and was much closer to the final production design. This car had a V6 PRV rear engine. The radiator was now in front. The car now had a new DMC front grille, with the front turn signals having been moved inward. Gone was the large front trunk, and the hood now opened from its rear. But the interior still had some DeLorean safety vehicle features. These safety features included a smaller knee crash bar, padded A-pillars, and padded side doors, but unfortunately the driver's side airbag was gone. The public's support for safety vehicles had waned, and car manufacturers had filed numerous lawsuits to stop mandatory safety features in cars. Still, the DeLorean was already generating dealer interest, with over 300 signed up dealers.
Hey, I got 44 orders. That's incredible. Yeah. All right, you look younger because this. Yeah. No, we're gonna do that.
You beat us here. Hi, John.
John. Yeah. Hi, how are you? 45 orders. Doris wants one. It's my wife. Well, I think it's the last one.
The DeLorean would go on to have its European debut at the Ulster Motor Show in February of 1981. And then be at the Geneva Motor Show in March of that same year. In spite of all the controversy around the man and the car, the DeLorean has forever become a pop culture and automotive icon, the symbol of the futuristic automobile. And now, it's come back to where it all began. In 2022, Bob Brandy's electric DeLorean conversion took center stage at the 2022 NADA conference in Las Vegas. The year's NADA conference was focused on electric vehicles and the future. John DeLorean himself was no stranger to electric vehicles, having been part of the design team on several prototype EVs and hybrid cars during his time at GM in the 1960s. But GM's forays into electric vehicles at that time were by far from the first. In fact, electric cars were some of the earliest cars in the world, thanks to Thomas Edison and his nickel-iron battery. Over the decades, as internal combustion technology improved and became more widely adopted, electric cars fell by the wayside, due mostly to the limited range and durability of their batteries. Early lead-acid batteries had a life cycle of about a year before needing to be replaced, at a cost of thousands of dollars. This would obviously not be practical in a mass-produced car. But battery technology continued to improve and evolve, pushed by many automakers, technology corporations, and governments. By the 1970s, for example, the silver hydride batteries used on another project John DeLorean had a hand in, the electrically powered lunar rover, could withstand temperatures up to -100 degrees. By the 1990s, batteries using nickel metal hydride had become resilient enough to be used in some of the first production model EVs, put out by major auto manufacturers. Some of these cars are still on the road today. The game changer for electric vehicles was the lithium-ion battery. First developed in the 80s and 90s, but seeing widespread adoption in the early 2000s, these batteries have a life cycle of nearly 10 years, and an energy density greater than 10 times that of lead-acid batteries. Today, lithium-ion batteries are the main element of most electric vehicle drivetrains. Electric vehicles have come a long way, and today's EVs outperform internal combustion cars in many areas. They are also at the forefront of the self-driving revolution. John DeLorean was a pioneering automotive engineer, and was involved in some of the progress of electric vehicles firsthand. So it's fitting that an electric DeLorean would be the symbol of the automotive future at NADA 2022. While the electric DeLorean drew crowds at the conference center, Bob's DeLorean Time Machine did the same at the NADA Participants Party in the new Allegiant Stadium. The next day, the DeLorean EV would have pride of place at the NADA EV Solutions booth and keep drawing a crowd, showing that its pop culture influence and futuristic design can turn heads even 44 years later.
I think the coolest thing about this to me, like most striking, is probably the fact that it's mixing, like, you know, taking an old car, right, and putting something new inside of it. Because, right, it's like Back to the Future, but it's
real life.
Yeah, it's real life. It's integrating, and I think that's really cool.
I think of the fact that in Back to the Future, you know, there's that line where Doc says, you know, this thing's electric. And here we are sitting with an electric DeLorean, sitting in the EV Solutions Center talking about electric cars. And so it's watching all of this kind of like come into reality now that we're living in the future essentially. But
living it, yes.
Yeah, but it is today. And again, this is just an example of how we've taken something that is, you know, a beautiful car that was designed long ago, but by someone who was transformative in the auto industry.
The question is, how do you relate DeLorean with what's happening now, I think? DeLorean was a long-term GM engineer, and he went out to start his own venture. Of course, you know, the Wall Street and it's all changed since then. And it was probably hard at that point. The big three were still the big three. He didn't have probably all the competition we have now. And he stuck his neck out to do something different. Sometimes back then, maybe that wasn't an easy thing to do.
This will stand the test of time. I guarantee we have this conversation in 20 years. Every kid who was born now will know what this car is just because how iconic they are.
I'm overwhelmed. I thought it was just, you know, we're going to have a couple cars here. But the fact that they have taken a DeLorean, the DeLorean, 44 years later, and made it a centerpiece of an automobile show is just, it's outstanding. It's just, who would have ever thought?
It's amazing.
It's amazing, exactly. It's a tribute to John DeLorean. If he was still alive, it'd be one of those times where he had a big smile, which was really rare. But it just, the DeLorean being center stage, you know, after its interesting history, here it is 44 years later. What other car has ever been center stage 44 years later? It hasn't happened. This is the first. It's just so amazing.
Well, that wraps it up here. Electric cars are the future. And DeLorean will be part of that future.